to the Daily Bite. I'm your host, Pastor Steve Andrews.
Let's read 1 Chronicles chapter 7. The sons of Isaachar, Tola, Puah, Jashub, and Shimron, 4. The sons of Tola, Uzi, Rephaiah, Jeriel, Jami, Ibsam, and Shemuel, heads of their fathers' houses, namely of Tola, mighty warriors of their generations, their number in the days of David being 22,600. The son of Uzi, Izrahiah, and the sons of Izrahiah, Michael, Obadiah, Joel, and Ishiah. All 5 of them were chief men. And along with them by their generations, according to their fathers' houses, were units of the army for war, 36,000, for they had many wives and sons. Their kinsmen, belonging to all the clans of Isaachar, were in all 87,000 mighty warriors enrolled by genealogy. The sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, and Jediel, 3. The sons of Bela, Esbon, Uzi, Uziel, Jeremoth, and Eri, 5, heads of fathers' houses, mighty warriors, and their enrollment by genealogies was 22,034. The sons of Becher, Zemira, Joash, Eleazar, Elionai, Omri, Jeremoth, Abijah, Anathoth, and Elameth. All these were sons of Becher, and their enrollment by genealogies according to their generations as heads of their fathers' houses, mighty warriors, was 20,200. The sons of Jediael, Bilhan. The sons of Bilhan, Jeush, Benjamin, Ehud, Kenana, Zethan, Tarshish, and Ahishahar. All these were the sons of Jediael according to the heads of their fathers' houses, mighty warriors, 17,200 able to go to war. And Shuppim and Huppim were the sons of Ir, Hushim the son of Aher. The sons of Naphtali, Jaziel, Guni, Jazer, and Shallum, the descendants of Bilhah. The sons of Manasseh, Azrael, whom his Aramean concubine bore. She bore Machir, the father of Gilead. And Machir took a wife for Huppim and for Shuppim. The name of his sister was Maacah. And the name of the second was Zelophehad, and Zelophehad had daughters. And Maacah, the wife of Machir, bore a son, and she called his name Peresh. And the name of his brother was Sheresh, and his sons were Ulam and Racham. And the son of Ulam, Bedan. These were the sons of Gilead, the son of Machir, son of Manasseh. And his sister Hamoleketh bore Ishhad, Abiezer, and Mahlah. The sons of Shemida were Ahian, Shechem, Likhi, and Aniam. The sons of Ephraim, Shuthelah, and Bered his son, Tahath his son, Eliadah his son, Tahath his son, Zabad his son, Shuthelah his son, and Azer and Eliad, whom the men of Gath, who were born in the land, killed because they came down to raid their livestock. And Ephraim their father mourned many days, and his brothers came to comfort him. And Ephraim went in to his wife, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Beriah, because disaster had befallen his house. His daughter was Shira, who built both lower and upper Beth Horon, and Uzan Shira. Repha was his son, Resheph his son, Tela his son, Tahan his son, Ladan his son, Ammihud his son, Elishama his son, Nun his son, Joshua his son. Their possessions and settlements were Bethel and its towns, and to the east Naaran, and to the west Gezer and its towns, Shechem and its towns, and Aiah and its towns. Also in possession of the Manassites, Bethshean and its towns, Tanakh and its towns, Megiddo and its towns, Dor and its towns. In these lived the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. The sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, and their sister Sarah. The sons of Beriah, Heber and Malchiel, who fathered Birzaith. Heber fathered Japhlet, Shomer, Hotham, and their sister Shua. The sons of Japhlet, Pesach, Bimhal, and Ashvath. These are the sons of Japhlet. The sons of Shemer, his brother, Roga, Jehuba, and Aram. The sons of Helam, his brother, Zophah, Imnah, Shelish, and Amal. The sons of Zophah, Suha, Harnepher, Shual, Beri, Imrah. Bezer, Had, Shammah, Shilsha, Ithran, and Bera. The sons of Jether, Jephaneh, Pispa, and Era. The sons of Ulah, Ara, Haniel, and Raziah. All of these were men of Asher, heads of fathers' houses, approved, mighty warriors, chiefs of the princes. Their number enrolled by genealogies for service in war was 26,000 men. This is the word of the Lord. A lot of names today, again, as we continue the genealogy. We have one more chapter of genealogy left for us in chapter 8, but this really does try to tie up most of the accounts of the 12 sons of Israel. A couple of notes on names. My professor, when I was in the seminary at St. Louis, studying Hebrew and Old Testament studies, Professor Adams, I still remember him suggesting, instead of trying puzzles, like some people like to sit down and do Sudoku kind of puzzles, as a student of Hebrew and the scriptures, what do you need those kinds of puzzles for? Just sit down and go to a chapter like this and try to parse out these names and figure out what these people's names mean. And there's something to that. I mean, we get the one example. Beriah is named that because it comes from the Hebrew word for disaster. If you look later, so that's verse 23. Actually, there's another Beriah in verse 30. If you look later in the text, there's a woman, actually, by the name of Shira. And then there's a town named Uzan Shira. So the city ended up being named after her, with the Uzan part being from a verb in Hebrew that means to balance something or to listen. And so likely here, Uzan referring to the portion of Shira as that city becomes known. So names have these different meanings, connections. Shira herself, by the way, her name means remainder. It comes from that Hebrew word. There's a lot there. It would be interesting as you hear and see such names, if you did study such names, if we'd start naming our children these things again. You do see that from time to time. If you're a church-going family, you'll run into other Christians who name their children with names that they find in Scripture, seeking to connect themselves to the church that has gone before them as well. So names can be enjoyable in such a way, but at the same time, when you're just trying to read a genealogy, it can be quite difficult to pronounce them all, certainly. For that note, I was taught in my seminary classes, just pronounce them the best you can and keep moving, and most likely no one else will know the difference either, and so they'll just appreciate you giving it the try, the effort. And I'd suggest that as you read such a thing with your kids too. So Isaachar starts the list today. He's the 9th born son to Jacob, Israel, out of the 12. 5th for Leah. She had a break, had 4 first, and then took a little time in between. He's her 5th son, 9th total. Zebulun's going to come right after him as the 10th son, also of Leah. So those two are close as brothers. But Zebulun doesn't make the list of the tribes that we learn about here. Nor will Dan. So when we get to verse 13, Naphtali is the 6th son, born of Bilhah, the maidservant of Rachel. So the first brother there would be Dan. Bilhah also bearing Dan. He's the first one not born of Leah for Jacob. And Dan is missing as well from the list. I don't have an answer to you for why that is, like why Dan and Zebulun get skipped here. If it were just Dan, might be able to suggest the idea that Dan's family tree just really went south and left the Lord really quickly. I guess technically they didn't go south, they went north, but they abandoned Yahweh, and there's much conflict there. And that seems to be why when you get to Revelation chapter 7 and the 144,000 of Israel are being described in the various tribes, Dan's tribe is skipped, and Levi's name is actually included in that list of 12, although it's usually not. So, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you with this list in 1 Chronicles. Again, the focus of the author is to track the blessing of Yahweh on his people, that they have come out of the exile, that they are restored by God. They are his people. Maybe there's a connection. Maybe the descendants of Dan and Zebulun simply are less faithful. It's not that we're not going to see them. Both names will appear in chapter 12, for example, coming up. Interestingly, with Issachar, and then with Benjamin, and then with Asher, we're told numbers for war. That's new in the list so far. The genealogies we've been seeing have not had that as their primary focus, but again, kind of an oddity for this particular chapter that's brought in. That might, though, be a good family conversation. What kind of strength is most important? They're all described as mighty men, so there's physical strength. Then there's strength by numbers, right? I mean, if you have a chance to go one-on-one with somebody, or you had to fight 1 against 100, we'd pick the one-on-one. The 100 would have an easy time overcoming us. So physical strength, strength in numbers, or strength of faith. Which of the three matters most? And ultimately the answer is strength of faith, because we enter paradise not by our own doing, but by Christ's doing. And that's really part of the Chronicles picture here too. Again, they did not rescue themselves from their exile in Babylon. God has delivered them. God has been faithful. God will keep his promise to put someone on David's throne over Jerusalem forevermore, which we know to be Christ. Christ, then, as we think of it, Christ has forgiven us by his blood shed on the cross. It's not our action, but it's his that's already been done for us. Another oddity that shows up, Naphtali and Manasseh, there's a lot of focus on the mothers, which has not been necessarily the common trend through the book thus far. We do have one of the names that might be familiar to you as you read your way through the list. Again, a lot of unknowns. Zelophehad. I know that's a strange name, but some of you might recognize it in verse 15. Zelophehad is Numbers chapter 27. He's a man that did not have sons. He only had daughters. And so the Israelites were learning about the inheritance. And so a family tree had the inheritance in the land of Israel, the promised land. And when a father died, his land would be passed to his sons. That way it always stayed within the family. Well, the daughters end up petitioning Moses, wondering what they should do since their father had no sons. They didn't want his name to be blotted out from Israel. And so Numbers chapter 27, you'll see Yahweh's response to that, saying that they're right. And so the daughters themselves will have the inheritance of their father, and it becomes a statute for Israel moving forward, again, so that the father's name is not blotted out. It will continue to be passed on for generations, remaining within the same family tree. So we go down to verse 21, as we look at then the tribe of Ephraim there. The men of Gath are mentioned as coming down and killing both Azer and Eliad because they came to raid their livestock. Gath is one of the 5 chief cities of the Philistines, so one of Israel's enemy neighboring nations. They're right to the southwest of the Promised Land. And Ephraim really ends up being central in terms of where it's located in the Promised Land. So Philistia, not far off, the Philistines come on a raid, and these men are killed. We don't actually see that anywhere else in Scripture, and it's historically, it's probably pretty close to 1,000 years, 900 years prior to when the chronicler wrote this, so it's an intriguing detail for him to have included. But he did, and I think it looks like the purpose of it would be to go to verse 22, the idea that Ephraim mourned, and he was comforted by his brothers, but then also in verse 23, he takes comfort in his wife. And it's a reference to them having sex and having a child together. I don't say that jokingly here. I mean, the idea that he took comfort in his wife is what that's about. That the gift of sex to husband and wife, the gift of physical intimacy is actually, it's a good thing. And oftentimes we don't say that enough as the church, as sex is something abused and mistreated in many ways by our culture. So we ultimately seem to avoid talking about it often, or if we are talking about it, we're saying how negative it is. And that's not always the case. I mean, this is a good thing for this family. And they have a son from it, Beriah, and Dad names him after this disaster. It's unusual, verse 24, I've already mentioned Shira, the daughter who built those towns. That's an unusual thing. Usually daughters would not be the ones to do that kind of work. So that gets mentioned here. Verse 27, very short, just 6 words here for us in English. Nun, his son, Joshua, his son. This is the Joshua. When you think of the Old Testament, the book of Joshua, the assistant to Moses, the one who's going to lead them into the promised land, who's going to be the commander for them in battle as they drive out the Canaanite tribes, that's him. That's that Joshua. There is a really terrible dad joke with this. Other than Adam and Eve, who is the only person in Scripture without parents? Joshua, son of Nun. Told you it's pretty bad. Bethel, Shechem, Megiddo are 3 of the towns mentioned as going to the tribe of Ephraim here. Important, prominent towns. Shechem is going to show up in the Old Testament numerous times. Bethel's going to be really, once the kingdom splits into north and south, Israel and Judah, Bethel is like the southernmost town of prominence in Israel, and it's where Jeroboam is going to build a false temple to false gods and demand that the Israelites go there for worship. So instead of crossing the border to Judah to go to Jerusalem, to go to Yahweh's temple and worship God, he feared if they went, they wouldn't come back. So he builds temples in his northernmost city of Dan, southernmost of Bethel. Bethel, by the way, means house of God. And then we get Megiddo. Megiddo is going to be off to the northwest a little bit more, and it's part of a valley. It's a city right on the edge of a valley. Megiddo is prominent throughout history. That valley is prominent throughout history. Really, when you think of it, when you look at a map, the Promised Land is the connection point, the place where 3 continents meet. And so war is quite common there. Important battles in the history of the world. And so Megiddo becomes that kind of a site, which I think is why Revelation references it. And you don't recognize it in English because of our way of transliterating the text. Har Megiddo, Armageddon, Revelation chapter 16, verse 16. It's Hebrew, as John tells us. Har is the Hebrew word for a mountain. And so it's the mountain of Megiddo. Megiddo is actually part of a valley, not a mountain. So it's an interesting, fascinating kind of read there. Revelation is filled with symbolic language. So this might be a family conversation point just for the fun of it. Can you think of a time, this is the description in Revelation 16, where the devil and his armies, his beasts, the first beast, the political beast, the second beast is the religious beast, false teachers. Can you think of a time where the devil and earthly government and false teachers fought against God on a mountain trying to kill him? I don't know if your kids can quite put that one together or not. Depends on how old they are. But the picture becomes Christ on the cross as you think of the devil fighting against Jesus, thinking he can kill God and win by doing so. And he gets the help of the Roman Empire, Pontius Pilate, as well as the false teachers of the Jews, the Jewish leaders who demand for his crucifixion. It's a fascinating way to look at Revelation 16, but Megiddo is why I bring that up. And then not much really to add with Asher's list there, except for we go back to counting some men who served in war. The Lord works also through war to provide for his people in the Promised Land.